that was the devil just lying to me and telling me that it was okay to cheat on my husband.
So I struggle with anger, as I talked about, and I struggle with pornography as well. Those are things that I brought into our marriage. I knew that our marriage wasn't doing well, but I didn't know why. And then I open up and I'm looking at these emails, and initially I thought, this is just a sick joke.
Are you currently married? Are you engaged to be married? Do you someday want to be married? Here are the most common promises made at a wedding. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. But what happens when we bring our dysfunctions, our hurts, our bad habits, and our character defects into that marriage? Is there a way to change a broken marriage into a healthy marriage? These are the questions that I want to ask our guest today. I'm Eric Hutchinson, and this is the If Nothing Changes podcast. I have a wonderful couple with me today, and they are going to share with us their life change story. Let's get into it, shall we? Hey, friends, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Kareena, and I have lived in Northwest Arkansas for coming up on 18 years.
And I'm Joe. I'm married to Kareena, and I have also been in Arkansas for 18 years.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming to our podcast. Let's get to know you just a little bit. Before you guys met each other, I'm assuming that you were raised in a family somewhere. So, Kareena, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from, if you're not from Northwest Arkansas, and tell us a little bit about your family dynamic, how many brothers and sisters you had, your mom and dad, and what your relationship was like with them.
Sure. I am from Bakersfield, California. I grew up out in the country of Bakersfield, California, kind of between Shafter and Wasco, out in the country there. I grew up with 3 stepbrothers, a stepsister, and a biological sister. And big family.
So were you close to your parents or to a brother and sister in particular than the others? Or
I grew up with my stepmom and my biological dad. And I was closest to my biological sister growing up. And then I was also very close to my dad growing up.
Okay.
And there was a lot of abuse from other members of the family that I had to go through and through a lot of years of my growing up. And that was very difficult. Yeah. But my dad's love, I feel like, is what carried me through childhood and just gave me hope.
Oh.
Yeah.
How about you, Joe? Where'd you grow up?
So actually the funny thing is, so I was born in Arkansas. I tell people this. I lived here like 9 weeks, so that makes me a local. But I actually grew up most of my life overseas, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia. And then when I turned 18, my senior year of high school, I moved to Bakersfield, California, which is where I met Kareena. My parents were not perfect parents, but they were great parents.
So why don't you move to, you both apparently got into Bakersfield, California whenever Joe moved there. Mm. So did you meet in school? How did you meet?
That's a funny story. Actually, so Joe and I like to tell the story that we met before the internet existed because we're that old. Bulletin board systems were a thing back then where one computer would call another computer. And Joe just so happened to be running a bulletin board system, otherwise known as a BBS. And I would get online looking for someone to talk to or something to do. And I actually ended up meeting him that way. We became the best of friends, and we've been best of friends ever since.
Was there any God experiences in your families growing up? I mean, or did that come in after you guys met, or when did you have a God experience?
Wow. So for me, the first God experience that I had was, so as I mentioned earlier, we lived out in the country. One day, this big green bus showed up and stopped out in front of our house. And these 2 missionaries got out. And they said, "Hey, do you want to go to church?" And they took us to this little church, this little tiny building, and they taught us about Jesus.
So, Joe, how about you? Did you have any God experiences early on or not?
So I was aware of who Jesus was, but it really didn't have much of an impact on my life.
So when did you accept Christ? When did you become a Christian?
So Kareena and I actually we call ourselves adult converts because we kind of, even though we had that introduction to church a little early on, we actually as adults we went to a business conference that also had a church service on a Sunday, and Kareena and I both we love to tell that part of the story too. Mm-hmm. That this guy gets up. It was amazing. He was talking about all kinds of different difficulties, especially things I was dealing with. And then he did an altar call, and Kareena and I looked at each other at the same time and said, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" And we went down and accepted Christ, which was also super cool.
Yeah,
because they gave us a Bible.
Yes, and also, our beliefs kind of like swayed. We believe, we don't believe, we don't know what we believe, and I guess overall we were kind of agnostic. But when we went to this convention, that altar call thing happened, and that was really amazing. But a little side thing that was also happening is we had been married for about 2.5 years at that point, and we were trying to get pregnant. And I have something called polycystic ovarian syndrome, so it was very difficult to get pregnant in the first place. And so I wasn't able to get pregnant, and we were on all kinds of different fertility treatments and all of that. And so we're at this convention. The altar call happens. We both look at each other at the same time. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? And, we are thinking what we're thinking. We go down and we accept Christ officially, like for real this time. We get a Bible. We head back home, and we're driving 10 hours from Salt Lake City, Utah, back to Sacramento at the time, which is where we lived, reading the New Testament of the Bible. When he was driving, I was reading it. When I was driving, he was reading it. And anyway, so 5 weeks later, I get a call from my genetic counselor who says, "Well, I guess you already know that you're pregnant." And I had no idea. I was jumping up and down like I just won the lottery. And he was, of course, where were you? Were you in?
I was actually in a training.
A training seminar somewhere else, like not even in Sacramento, right?
Yeah, I was in San Jose.
Yeah, San Jose. So it's pretty wild. And we feel like that was God saying, "Here you go." I mean, for us, that's what happened, because whenever I had my blood tests and all of that, and they took an ultrasound and they were able to see about how far along I was, it was 5 weeks. And it was 5 weeks ago that we had accepted Christ. So that was absolutely a God thing.
So we jumped ahead.
We did
a little bit. Yeah, so I know you were 2 years, but that's okay. That's when you would say that's when Christ came into your life, and you guys both say you kind of claim that together, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So you hear people say, "Hey, the honeymoon's over," and sometimes that's a year, sometimes it's a few days, and sometimes it's 3 or 4 years. So, whenever you guys got married, and again, I'm making an assumption that, things were cake and cookies for a while, but was there anything or any time that you said, "You know what? The honeymoon's over and we are really married"? And was there what time period in your life was it in your marriage that you would say, honeymoon's over, we're now officially just married?
Yeah, do we do the dirty secret? We were not Christians yet. And Kareena and I actually moved in together. So we lived together for 3 years, I think it was. Mm-hmm. We got married the week before I graduated college because I promised we'd get married before I graduated, and then dragged it out to the very end.
Okay, so how long, so you lived together for a while. How long before you got married and you made it official?
I think it was about 3 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So let me ask you this, because was there a shift? Sometimes people that live together, they live together for years, and then when they get married, something changes, and all of a sudden these dysfunctions and things start coming out. So you guys both have mentioned that there were a few dysfunctions maybe in your childhood growing up. So did you bring those into your marriage? Did that happen while you were living together? Did you start saying, man, or did it happen more after you got married?
I mean, overall, we got along really well until we moved to Rogers. And I'm not saying like everything shifted, but when we moved to Northwest Arkansas, that's when my difficulties of my childhood, all of the dysfunction started to come to a head. And I don't know exactly why that was the time, because how many years were we married by the time all of that started happening? 13 years?
9 years. We moved
9
here,
years?
yeah, 2005, and we got married in 96. So,
Yeah.
9 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to make a long story short, he got really busy doing things. And in my own struggles, which I have something called love and relationship addiction, which I could talk about in a little bit if you would like me to do that. And I also have codependency. So those are two really big struggles in my life. You know, one of those, love and relationship addiction, for me, it came to a head. And of course, I didn't know I had that at the time. It's not like it's a medical condition. It's a mental condition. But one of the things that happened for me was when Joe got really busy with his schedule, I started finding things to do. And of course, for me at that time, God was in my life, but I was not making him first in my life. I was not making God a priority at all. And so whenever Joe got busy, I started trying to make myself busy by getting on the internet again. And, you know, at that point, it was like Facebook and MySpace, those kind of things. And things just started to go really dark for me at that point. And
so, Kareena, why don't you explain to listeners and to myself, because I don't know that I even fully understand it. When you say you have a love and relationship addiction, what does that mean? How does that manifest itself in your life?
Yeah. So for me personally, and when I describe this to anybody who's like a newcomer at the church that I go to or something, and they're talking about different struggles in their lives, if I'm describing this to somebody, what I tell them is that for me, what it is having a need to feel loved, affirmed, approved, which those are all normal things. Everybody, I would like to think that everybody would like to feel loved and approved and affirmed and flattered or complimented or whatever. But to a person with love and relationship addiction, it's at a addiction level where it's like, if I don't have that, I'm going to go find it. And without any kind of recovery from that, or even knowing that that was a problem, it was wild and rampant. And so, so that's what love and relationship addiction is. It's, for me, it's going out and looking for attention, flattery, approval. For me, back when Joe and I started having the really big problems that I was referring to a few minutes ago, when that was happening, what I was doing is I was going on social media and I was posting like a picture of myself just to have somebody say, "Oh, you're so pretty. Oh, you have the nicest eyes," or "Your hair is so pretty," or whatever, or saying something bad about myself so that somebody would turn it into a compliment, kind of fishing for attention.
Okay.
And just so that I could get it, just to fill that God-shaped hole that only God could fill. Yeah.
So you mentioned that whenever you moved to Rogers, that Joe got busy.
Yes.
And so his work was apparently encumbersome, that it was you were gone a lot, or you were traveling, I don't know. But you said that's whenever the love and relationship addiction started ramping
to really
up.
kick in. Yes. Yeah. And so at that point, I would get onto social media. Like I said, I would do the, put a picture of my face on there or whatever. And then we met some friends. Both of us met some friends who, it was a husband and wife couple. And the husband started like flirting with me and giving me a lot of flattery and things like that over chat messages. And in my love and relationship addiction, for me, it was more like, oh, well, that feels really good to get that. Because, I don't know what my mind is thinking at that point, but I'm trying to figure out, like, for some reason, I reasoned away any kind of, like that's kind of cheating on your husband if you're flirting or even entertaining the idea of somebody else flirting with you. But that was going on, and I gave into it, and I flirted right back with him, and then that turned into an affair, unfortunately. And that is totally something that was my 11 relationship addiction and codependency. The codependency part of it came in where this guy would tell me all about his marital woes, and then he'd say, you have to promise me that you won't tell anybody. And so, of course, I would promise not to tell him. But what that was doing in my 11 relationship addiction and in my codependency was that was forming a bond. It was a false bond. It was a bond that made me feel like he needs me in my codependency. He needs me to show up for him. But also in my 11 relationship addiction, in feeling like he needed me, it made me feel really good and made me want to just keep that going. And so, yeah, that's where it went for me. It was a really scary place now that I look back on it. In the midst of it, it was a fantasy world, complete fantasy world where I had this whole idea that everything was going to work out. That in my brain, I thought Joe and I can get a divorce and I can go be with this guy. He's going to divorce his wife and we're going to share the kids and everything's going to be perfect. And that wasn't at all. That was the devil just lying to me and telling me that it was okay to cheat on my husband. And I'm so thankful that God put a stop to it.
So, Joe, were you aware you were busy? You were busy. Was there any warning signs looking back? Did you see, or I mean, did you feel anything? I mean, what was going on with you during that time period?
I think I was just in denial about it. I was not putting God first. I wasn't putting Kareena first. I was putting me first. So I struggle with anger, as I talked about, and I struggle with pornography as well. Those are things that I brought into our marriage. Our community group said, "Hey, there's this ministry that deals with lots of different things, drugs, alcohol, but also pornography and anger issues, and so we should go check this out." And so we did, we went, and that first night, as we're on our way home, I told Kareena, I am going back, because I had tried to stop the pornography on my own so many times, but I saw guys at Celebrate Recovery one guy had 30 days of sobriety, and I was like, that's amazing. I would love to get that. So I started going back. I got into a step study, which basically it's a group of guys, and we just committed to like a year-long program where we're going to go through, and it was really cool. I had gotten into this rhythm of talking to God and listening to God and looking at my emotions. And this one evening, I was trying to print something on my computer, and it wasn't working. And Kareena and I shared computers all the time, so it wasn't a big deal. I just switched over to try printing it on her computer, and she had forgotten to log out of her secret email account. And I'm looking there. Now, friends had said, hey, there's something wrong or whatever, and I was just dismissing that. But I knew that our marriage wasn't doing well, but I didn't know why. And then I open up and I'm looking at these emails, and initially I thought, this is just a sick joke, that this is just some joke they're passing back and forth between them. And then I read a couple more, and I was angry. And I stood up, and Kareena I was in the living room, the dining room area where the computer was, and she was in the bedroom, and I, like, all of it came into focus. I realized the reason that our marriage is falling apart, like everything, and that not everything was that. Like, I blamed that for everything, but there was all kinds of other things. This was just the affair was just a symptom. But I was angry, and I was done. I actually walked into the bedroom with the intent of telling her that she had to leave. Like, we're just done. And in that 30 feet, God talked to me. I knew that it was God telling me, stop, kneel by the bed, ask her what happened. And I did. And Kareena told me that she was having the affair, and it was, I know that it was a God thing because, as I mentioned, I struggle with anger. And for the next 3 days, I didn't get to be angry. Kareena was trying to figure out what's going on. And Kareena, who was still my best friend at this point, who I still loved very much, I'm comforting her. I mean, at one point we were on the back deck and she's just crying and I'm comforting her. And which is, for those that know me will know that's a God, because I am not that cool.
So is that where you, Kareena, decided, hey, I'm ready to work work on this?
Oh, yes. Well, when he came to me, obviously I was shocked. Oh my gosh, the gig is up, because that was still the person that I was at that time. That was the life that I was living. I was shocked. And then when he went to his knees and he said, Kareena, you have to tell me what's going on. Those were the words he said to me. And I just spilled it all out. I told him everything. We went and sat on the bed and I told him everything. I was shaking uncontrollably, crying and sobbing and telling him everything. I'm also realizing I've got to stop this affair. And this affair was an addiction to me. And so that was very scary because that was like me having to give up my drug. And, but I knew I had to. And, Joe comforting me out on the deck was exactly what God told him to do. Like he said, that was a God thing. There's no way that in his anger that he would have done something like that if God had not intervened, because he was very much going to just throw me out of the house. And in Joe talking to me on that back deck and hugging me and comforting me, I was in a big heap on the deck crying, and I was reaching out to God saying, God, I need help. I don't know how to fix this. I want to save my marriage and I don't know how to do it. And I felt like God took my hand. And it was actually my husband that took my hand. And this always makes me cry, but I'm just so grateful. But he said, if you're willing to do the work of recovery, we will get through this together. And I was so ready to do it. I said, yeah, I'll do it. And that's when I started going to the recovery groups that he had already been going to for a year at that point. I started going and I dug in, and I've never looked back.
So tell me a little bit about the process. How does the trust come back?
Yeah, rebuilding trust was really, it took it took quite a while.
Yeah, I can actually speak into that. I actually became very determined that I was going to build back trust. And so without his asking me to, I actually handed him my laptop and my phone and any other electronic equipment that I possibly had. Said, I need you to change the passwords and I just need to be off of everything because I know that I can't control my tendency to do the wrong thing. I'm going to go back because that's an addiction and I'm trying to break the addiction. I know that it's wrong. All of that. So I handed him everything and I said, I need you to take this because I don't trust myself with it. So I did that and he took that. And then I also started to log every trip that everywhere that I drove. And I think those things definitely helped to rebuild trust. And then just always keeping in mind that you're known by your fruit. And I wanted to bear good fruit. So in order to do that, I had to get closer to God.
There were a few other things, like for a period of time, we agreed that I could ask any question and she would answer it.
Yep.
And I would just know that she's going to tell me the truth. And so if I don't want to know the truth, then don't ask that question. Yeah. And so that was important for earning the trust back. And that worked really well.
Such an amazing story. Let me ask you this. Do you think that you would be as close as you are now if these issues hadn't happened?
So that's a really funny question. I do not recommend an affair as a marriage improvement program, but we are closer now than we ever were before. That was probably 2 years ago. It occurred to me that God literally used my pornography addiction to save my marriage. That's an amazing God. Because without that, I wouldn't have been going to CR, which, I love CR, but, Jesus is the important thing. I would not have been in a program where I was learning to talk to God more, read the Bible more. Like, I would not have improved my relationship with God, and I would not have been in a place where I would have been willing to save our marriage.
Yeah.
It took both of us to decide to save our marriage, and I wouldn't have been in that spot.
So let me ask you one more question that actually has two parts to it. One, if there's someone listening and they are thinking about getting married, or maybe they're just married, what advice would you give them? They're either newly married or about to get married. So what advice would you give them as a new married couple? And then secondly, to the person who is about to give up on their marriage?
Well, so I really feel like love is a decision. It's also a feeling, but there are times when it's a decision. For the people that are newly married or just about to get married, remember like how you feel now, and remember that forever, because 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when the kids have 5 different after-school activities, and the boss needs you to work the weekend, and the roof needs a repair, because of a hailstorm, and you may come across someone that it feels easier with, because you don't have kids and a house and and all of that other stuff. That doesn't mean that new relationship is really the one. It just means that you don't have as much baggage. Some of that baggage is good baggage, like when we go on a vacation trip. Some of the stuff in the suitcase is great, and some of it's dirty clothes that you're bringing home. But you don't have as much baggage. For those that might be in a situation where it's gotten rough and starting to think about divorce, I would say, like for me, the advice that I needed to get healthy for me was great advice. I needed to work on me. I needed to concentrate on me. But if you concentrate on yourself and working on improving yourself and your relationship with God, then even if the marriage doesn't work out, you come out a better person. If there are kids involved, your relationship will be much better with the kids and all of that. Again, I pray that doesn't happen. Lots of prayer. Prayer that your heart will change towards your spouse, and prayer that their heart will change back to you. Go all in, all the way to the end, and I pray there's not an end.
How about you, Kareena?
Yeah, I was just going to add to what he just said that, in the beginning, if you're in the process of getting ready to get married, premarital counseling, absolutely make sure you do that. And then also communication is key. It's so important to communicate your feelings, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, whatever they are. And that's something that Joe and I have returned to many, many, many times over the almost 26 years that we've been married now. And as he said, we are more in love and more in sync than ever before. Don't go to bed angry, but that also means to work on your dysfunctions or on your whatever you bring into the table, whatever you're bringing to the marriage, work on those things and ask God to help you in your recovery so that you don't continue to do the things that might harm your marriage. And that's things that I might bring to the marriage or things that he might bring to the marriage, to just keep working on those things. So, yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Kareena, for sharing your story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and you are thinking, someday I'm going to get married, maybe you're even engaged to be married, just remember that the issues that you are struggling with now will be carried into that marriage. Wouldn't it be better to deal with those issues now, to change your path now before your marriage? Maybe you are married and you are struggling. Maybe you have been betrayed and you are even ready to give up on your marriage. Let me just say that there is hope for your marriage, and God can change your path and bring healing and love into your relationship, just like He did for Joe and Kareena. Change is possible, but if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time.